Hello there, my very good friends. Andy Murray here for What Culture Wrestling, back for the first time in a couple of weeks with our breakdown of the latest episode of Vice's Dark Side of the Ring. We weren't here for David Schultz, and we weren't here for Herb Abrams, but we are absolutely here for the Road Warriors. Now, you guys are educated wrestling fans, you know your history. You know that Hawk and Animal are one of the most important and influential tag teams in wrestling history. You know that they popularized the power and paint thing. You know that they were huge stars. And you know about things like the 1998 angle when WWE grossly capitalized on Hawk's personal problems and had him climb up the Titantron and try to jump off. You know all of these things. That's why we're not going to cover them today. The point of these little breakdowns is to talk about the topics that don't dominate the discussion on the subject. So with that in mind, let's get into the episode. Let's focus on the new stuff. I'm Andy for What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 things that we learned from Dark Side of the Ring, the Road Warriors. Number 10, how Hawk and Animal met. Now this might not surprise you, but these guys didn't exactly grow up in the nicest neighborhoods. They both hailed from a rough and tumble working class area of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And as far as how they actually came together goes, well, Animal tells this story on the episode. He's working out at Jesse Ventura's gym. He's bench pressing, he's lifting all kinds of weights. It's good format, by the way. Lifting all kinds of weights when along comes Hawk, slaps him on the chest with his big beefy paw, and he says, "Hey pal, you're messing up. There's no way that you should be lifting less weight than me." Pretty unorthodox way to make an introduction, but these were kind of unorthodox guys, and their friendship would later blossom when they worked together in the same bar in the city. A rough bar, all kinds of shady stuff going on, and they were the bouncers. They've got one particularly interesting story from this time, actually. The owner of the bar apparently liked to, sell the old stuff that isn't legal and you put up your nose and isn't good for you. Anyway, when people would owe that gentleman money, he would have his bouncers, Hawk and Animal, take care of them. So we got a story here. Hawk and Animal take some guy who was in credit or whatever to the drug dealer, hung him over a bridge, each of them taking one leg, roughed him up, and convinced him to pay. And the way this story was told didn't sound like this was out of the ordinary for them. Number 9, how they were discovered. Ole Anderson, famous wrestling curmudgeon, blacklisted by pretty much everyone, he rolls into town one night and he goes to the very bar that Hawk and Animal are bouncers at. Now, this is weird, right? This is a weird way to get discovered, but here we go. Animal has a guy he's taking care of. Someone's been a nuisance in the bar, he grabs them, he lifts them up, takes them out of the door, launches them across, they do a little flip in the air, they land on the ground at Ole Anderson's feet. And Ole, that mad, hard bugger that he is, was like, hey, maybe I should recruit this guy. So he does. He brings Animal in solo, initially, to Georgia Championship Wrestling, and eventually, when Animal goes back to bouncing after figuring out he was actually making more money in that profession, Ole sees a picture of Hawk who'd been wrestling up in Vancouver, and at first he actually thinks he's the same dude as Animal. But he comes up with the idea to put them together, he brings them back down to Georgia Championship Wrestling with its national TV deal together as a tag team, and that was how the Road Warriors were born. Number 8, the impact of Paul Ellering. So Paul Ellering was a hugely influential figure on the Road Warriors, particularly in their early days. He was more than a manager on screen, he was one off screen as well. He would take them from territory to territory, making sure they never got taken advantage of by promoters and ensuring that they only stuck around long enough to maintain their buzz without ever wearing out their welcome. He was paired with the Road Warriors when they first got to GCW. Ole Anderson introduced them and said, "Paul, these guys are with you." And we got a story here, the first night together, they all just pack into Paul Ellering's black van together, and that was them. That was effectively them for much of their careers. Now, there's a whole bunch of other early stories here. We get tales of how the Road Warriors used to apologize to jobbers before beating them up in the ring. We also get a bunch of other stuff surrounding how they invented the tag team championship that they'd won in Chicago just to add a little bit of credibility for the debut. There's lots of great stuff on their formative years here, but the most important part by far is how them and Ellering became a thing. Number 7, who came up with their look. One of the first things that comes to mind when you think about the Road Warriors is their look. I mean, it was perfect. The mohawks, the face paint, the spiky shoulder pads, all that great stuff. It was phenomenal. How did they come up with this? Who came up with this? What was the situation? Well, if you look at the images that are presented early from their time in GCW, they kind of look like sexy cops. They got the leather, they got the hats. It's not great. It's not great. Ole Anderson comes to the duo. He says, hey guys, look at this picture of this guy with this mohawk, this red mohawk from the Road Warrior movie. I want you guys to look like him, and I want to see you using face paint as well. This clicks. It takes them a while to get the face paint right, but they eventually stumble on the right look. They shave their hair into mohawks. Animal, sorry, he's got the one, Hawk's got the two. Looks great. Who comes up with the shoulder pads, you might ask? Well, that was all Animal. Paul Ellering calls it a stroke of genius, and he's not wrong. Animal made them himself. He got the spikes from a metal working friend of his. He spent great time and effort in his own home, punching holes and adding chains and putting the spikes through these shoulder pads that he had. And they struck gold. Can you imagine the Road Warriors of the Legion of Doom without those shoulder pads? It kind of makes the whole thing. Number 6, when Hawk's issues really became a problem. The short answer to this is SummerSlam 92. So throughout this episode, we hear all kinds of stories about Hawk, his personal problems, his addictions, his vices. There's lots of stuff here. The poor guy was caught by them badly. Animal was a very patient man. Animal was the kind of guy who, instead of going to the bar after the show, would apparently go up to his room and sleep it off while Hawk was out partying. He was a good influence on Hawk throughout his career, but even he was at his wit's end a couple of times, the most notable of which was SummerSlam 92. Hawk showed up inebriated. They were relegated from a match near one of the top slots to a match with Money Inc. opening the main card proper. Hawk had already pissed Vince McMahon off, and he was so inebriated, he was incapable of performing the Doomsday Device finisher. He couldn't get off the top rope safely. They had to reconfigure things. It was kind of a mess. It was not a fun situation to be involved with. As the Road Warrior's success as the Legion of Doom was peaking, so too, unfortunately, were Hawk's personal problems. And in Animal's own words at the time, he was more than just frustrated, he was freaking hot. Number 5, the first big split. So Hawk and Animal formally went their separate ways shortly after SummerSlam 92. Hawk resigned from the company. Animal wanted to stick around in the WWE, be a professional and work the dates. Well, Hawk went over to Japan. He didn't carve out his own niche like Animal was trying to do in America, though. No, he replaced his tag team partner. He recruited Kensuke Sasaki as Power Warrior. Now, understandably, that was Animal's gimmick. He was Hawk's tag team partner. This guy had replaced him while he wasn't doing the same thing. He'd taken the gimmick, applied it to someone else, and that was something of a personal slight by all accounts. And it was during this time that it became very apparent that Animal was, at times, the one keeping Hawk's life together for him. His problems escalated once they were separated. He had all kinds of brushes with near-death experiences. There are stories told here that are just some really grim, dark stuff. Things get worse and worse and worse. Eventually, Hawk contracts hepatitis C. He overcomes it, however. He gets through it. And when the doctor tells him that you're fine, you can go back to living a normal life, he takes this as the hard partying is back on the table. Well, as we tragically learn later on in his life, sadly, it really shouldn't have been. Number 4, the Australia incident. So we get a story here from Animal. The Road Warriors are on tour, they're in Australia, there's all kinds of stuff happening. There's a story about one night when a bunch of wrestlers acquired a bunch of party essentials, as Animal calls them, and disappear for 2 days. Hawk was apparently part of that group. But it gets really dark at a wrestling show. Hawk, he's walking around by the, Animal, my bad. Hanging about by the entrance, sees a bunch of people gathered around somebody, figures that somebody's just a little bit burned out after a match. No, it's Hawk. They haven't wrestled yet. Hawk is being fed oxygen, he's being supplied oxygen, he's in no state to perform, he has to go to the hospital. His heart is on the verge of giving up. He's, in Animal's words, about to stroke out. Terrible stuff, really terrible stuff. Hawk phones Animal up while he's in the hospital. He says, hey man, you gotta get me out of here. In his words, I'm not dying in this country. Animal's really torn because he loves his brother, he loves his friend, but he hates what's happening. But eventually, he does that. He checks Hawk out of the hospital against doctor's orders. They get on a plane to the United States, and when they get there, when he gets Hawk safely to Tampa, he says, brother, you're on your own now. Number 3, getting clean. I think the most tragic thing about this story is that Hawk really got his life back on track towards the end. He was happy, he was healthy, he was married, his problems were gone. He used to say, in fact, that while cats get 9 lives, God gave him 10 lives so he could give 1 to Jesus. Hawk became a man of God. This came through an interaction and an invitation from the Christian power team. The Road Warriors both went up to one of their meetings together, and Hawk, in Animal's words, was the first guy at the altar. He was baptized that week. He discovered himself. He found God. He found a new lease on life, and he'd really started getting everything together towards his dying days. It's such a terrible shame that this happened so late in his life. And man, what's about to come is even more heartbreaking. Number 2, the last tribute. Hawk passed away on the day he had just moved, him and his wife, into a brand new house. He just finished lifting some heavy furniture. He went upstairs saying, "I'm gonna lie down, I don't feel well," and he passed away. Paul Ellering hears of this from Animal. Paul Ellering is obviously grief-stricken, but he has to get to the funeral. He has a nice little tribute here. This is really quite touching. So remember earlier on, their first night in GCW, they get in this black van and they start touring the roads together. They travel the world together, these 3 guys. Paul Ellering brings it back for the funeral. It's sitting in his garage, it's old, it's rusted, but no problem. He goes to the shop, gets a bunch of spray paint, fixes it up, covers all the rust, and he travels all the way to Florida in the same black van that these 3 guys traveled the world together. He tells the story like this thing's ramshackle and falling apart and hundreds of cars are overtaking him, but man, it's just such a nice story from a guy who really cared deeply about his fallen brother. Number 1, Paul Ellering's touching eulogy. Things get even more emotional here when Paul Ellering is asked to recall what he said at Hawk's funeral. He's asked directly for his eulogy, and Paul, emotional as he was, remembers it word for word. I'm just going to read this out to you because there's nothing I can say to add to it that really makes it any more impactful. Paul said, "Dark clouds covered the bright sun. Today we lost our friend, our brother of planes, trains, automobiles, and many, many miles. If I could steal a line from the outlaw Josie Wales, Hawk, it was good that men like us met in the struggle of life." It's exactly what he said at the service. It's a really touching tribute to a man who, just when it looked like he was on the verge of, living out the rest of his days peacefully and without problems, was taken from the world. So that's it, guys. My breakdown of the latest episode of Vice's Dark Side of the Ring on the Road Warriors is done. Now, as always, I'm interested in your takes, so go ahead and fire those off down in the comment section below. After that, it'd be awfully nice if you could like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications as well. After that, you can follow us on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE and myself at Andy H. Murray, where you can tell me how wrong I am. Goodbye.